Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lies We Left podcast. This is Erin. Thank you so much for joining us in this journey. We know it's hard. It's hard for us, but we can only imagine how hard it is for you, but we're hoping that this brings healing. Today is a very special day for us. We have our first guest, and we just can't imagine as sisters a guest that would be any better than the two people that we have with us right now. These two people are longtime family friends of ours. We grew up with them. I was best friends with, this guy sitting across from me. We have Stephen and Savannah. Rachel and Brooke grew up with Savannah, and basically every holiday that our family had, we had Stephen and Savannah's family with us, and they made holidays so much special. Just the laughter that they brought, the friendship that they brought. Your family holds a very special place in our hearts, and Stephen and Savannah, I hope y'all know that y'all hold a very special place in our hearts and always will. And so we just can't imagine any better guests than having both of you here. So Stephen and Savannah, introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Savannah. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Hi, I'm Stephen. Thrilled to be here. Glad to be a part of this, and looking forward to it.
So Stephen and Savannah grew up in the same church. They came at a little later time than when the church started, but they did grow up with us, and they're going to be telling their stories. And I think Savannah's going to be going first.
So where to start? Okay, so I know that, I was told by my parents that we first joined the church when I was 2 years old. Of course, I don't remember that far back. I was really young. I think my earliest memories are probably going to be around the age of 5. And, one of the biggest things I really remember is there was a lot of separation from children and parents. I was used to being with my mom all the time, being home with her. And I just remember, it got to the point of where, no, it's, you got to go take a nap. They would put these vests on us, Still to this day, I don't remember or understand why I was so terrified when they would put those plastic vests on. But all I know is it was almost like I went into survival mode when that vest was put on me and Velcroed. And it was, you don't talk, you don't ask questions, you do whatever the adults tell you, basically. My earliest remembrance of being molested was when I was 5 years old. I do know it was by a woman. I don't know exactly who it was. But I do remember, being laid down and being told, it's okay, be still, it's fine, everything's going to be fine. I do know that molestation happened with me from the ages of 5 to 11. Growing up in my household, my mom and my dad were very two different people. My mom was definitely someone who constantly needed reassurance, and my dad was very passive, but very much a loner. So it was very hard for him to constantly reassure my mom. So really honestly from a very early age, my parents really did not get along. I really didn't feel like my parents really liked each other. I know my dad was very stressed a lot with me, as a child. We weren't very financially off well. We were, I recall this one house that we lived in. We ended up having a peach tree outside, and we had pecan trees. And there would be times, I'd ask Mom, what are we going to eat? And I was very smart as a child, so I caught on very quickly. But a lot of times she'd be like, oh, well, for lunch, we're going to play a game, and we're going to go outside, and we're going to pick peaches, and then we're going to pick pecans, and we're just going to put those together and eat. And so at a very young age, I realized that food was scarce, and it was not something that was very, readily available. I don't, for the listeners, I do want them to know that I hold none of this against my parents. I have very much love, forgiveness for everything. This is just me telling my story so that, if someone else can hear this and say, hey, I went through that, I experienced that, and would help give them a voice, just like you ladies helped me feel like I had a voice and it was okay for me to share. My dad was very angry. Every day he would come home from work, it was almost like you were just waiting to see what his attitude was going to be, what his energy was. Was he mad that day? Was he happy that day? If he was mad, don't mess with dad. Leave dad alone. Let him do his own thing. And, my mom was the very opposite. If my dad was upset, well, why are you upset? Well, why are you angry? Are you mad at this? Are you mad at that? And so it caused my dad and my mom to be very much, clashing, because my dad just wanted to be left alone, but my mom always wanted to know why and what the reason was. Really from the age, I would have to say from 5 to 13, we had very hard punishment. Even when I was punished, I would ask, what did I do wrong? Did I say something? Did I do something, to make you this angry? And, there's little words, I'm just being completely honest, with everyone and the listeners. I don't really honestly remember what I did so wrong to get the punishment. We would have to write sentences. It was as a collective. So if, my older brother, me, and my brother that's underneath me, Stephen, which is here today, if one of them acted up, it affected all of us. So if one person was writing sentences and they didn't write it right and you couldn't see it clearly, everyone had to start all the way over again.
What the? And
write sentences all over. I know my biggest thing is I would get in trouble because I would start crying. Like, my hand hurts. Can I please not, And for that, bam, you get 300 more sentences, I remember, being told I had to stand in the corner. I would stand in the corner for me as a child, it felt like hours. It might not have been hours, but that's how it felt for me as a child. And whenever I would get tired, or I would, I remember one specific time I actually fell out of the corner because I had fallen asleep. And my dad yelled at me, picked me up, and stood me back in the corner and said, now you have to stand there longer. And at that time when I was a child, there were so many moments I would stand in that corner, I would cry. And, because, the church environment we grew up in was, God was very hateful. You are a sinner. You are filth. You are dirt under his feet. Like that's what I got from it. So there was many times when I would stand in the corner and that would happen, I would ask God, why do you hate me? What have I done so wrong and I'm so bad that this is what I deserve?
Is that what you were referring to in the beginning when you said that you had to wear those aprons? Were you talking about what they called children's church?
Yes.
I remember those.
Yes.
I remember those. So when you went into Sunday school or children's church, they put you in these aprons that were like, I guess to keep you clean. I don't know, but they did make us wear those. And I never remembered that until you said that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. But yes, there was a lot of separation from the adults and the children. And yes, they were very equal.
And even to the point where, my mom and I have a good relationship today, so we talk about things. And, there was times she told me that she would try to come check on me and, oh no, she's fine. Go back to church. So it was very much so a thing of separation of whoever was responsible for taking care of the children. That was their responsibility, whether you were a parent or not. You weren't really allowed. That's how I saw it. That was my viewpoint as a child, is that my own mom couldn't come and check on me, and it, part of it could have been, most of the time I would cry and I'd say, Mom, I'll sit there in the pulpit with you. I won't talk. I won't nothing. I will just sit there. Please just let me sit with you. And they would be like, no, you're not going to sit with your mom. You're going to stay in here. And that is one thing I don't understand. Looking back at my childhood, is if a child is crying and scared and they want to sit with their parent and they are a child who is not being disruptive, why was it so serious for them to be separated? What was the intention there? What was what was going through the people who, took care of us and, in the children's area that was so serious that we couldn't sit with our parents if we were behaving? That is something I still don't understand, and I have to this day haven't really gotten an answer or clarification of. So, you know, I dealt with, you know, even my dad's anger at home. You know, I know that's a big separation between my mom and my dad, because my mom would try to appease my dad and, you know, can you please not be so angry? Can you just let them go to bed? And then my dad would yell more. And a lot of times if my mom said something, we would get even more punishment if she came forward and said something. So it got to the point where my mom just silenced herself and stopped, you know, saying things or trying to speak on our behalf, because it turned out that it made it worse for us.
Stephen, do you remember any of this? As Savannah is talking, because you've always maintained you don't remember a lot of your childhood. Do you see flashbacks coming as she's talking?
I kind of vaguely remember maybe like the apron that you're talking about, which I didn't remember. It was almost like a giant bib,
Yeah.
I guess, that they'd put on. I vaguely remember that, but not until you mentioned it and I was sitting here thinking about it. I do remember that. You know, I do remember there being a big separation between the kids and the parents. You know, as soon as you got to church, you were put into that back room with whoever it was that was running the children's church at that time, which I think that they rotated people, but I can't remember for sure who it normally was. I do remember, I think the people that I do remember were the people that I liked. And that's really the only memory I have of that, is remembering the faces of the people that I liked doing it and being there, because, you know, they truly cared about us. One of those women is going to end up being a guest on this podcast as well. She was always extremely kind, you know, throughout my childhood.
Stephen, you and we grew up kind of like in a different era than I feel like Savannah, Brooke, and Rachel grew up in. Because hearing Savannah's story, even Rachel and Brooke's, I'm just like, ooh, I don't remember some of that. And so I wonder if it happened like to us, or if it just kind of subsided because those people that you were talking about started doing more of the children's church.
That may have been the case. I honestly don't have an answer, because there really is a lot of my childhood I don't remember. I don't really have any solid memories until I think probably 7 or 8. It's just more images and pictures that I have from when I was younger. Like, there's certain things, like, you know, I remember having a tree house. I remember one time jumping out of the tree house and landing on a nail, and, you know, my parents got mad at me because they told me, you know, I'm not supposed to be doing that and jumping out of the tree house. I'm supposed to climb down the ladder. And I remember this creepy old lady that everyone said was a witch that would steal pears out of our tree. Yeah, and people would be like, yeah, she's a witch, stay away from her. And she'd just be little old lady stealing pears out of our tree in our front yard.
Technically, she was, because my oldest brother and I decided to sneak into her backyard, and we found chicken legs and chicken heads and a pot which I don't even know how she was allowed to have a campfire, because that was like a community area.
It's a different
but
time.
I saw that, and that scared the crap out of me, and I decided I am never going to talk to this lady, see this lady. I shouldn't have done this. Hopefully I'm not cursed now.
You don't want a Hansel and Gretel situation
no.
with you and your brother. No. All right, sorry. Go ahead, Savannah.
So yeah, I remember probably around so one of the memories that stick out to me the most is, it had to be a period after my grandpa had died on my dad's side. He had bought me a stuffed animal dog that I actually still have to this day, and I still sleep with, and I am not ashamed of that. And I remember, you know, at the age of 7, I really didn't understand the fact that he was going to pass away. I really didn't. I knew he was sick because we'd go to the hospital and visit him, but I didn't really grasp that concept that he is no longer going to be here. Until one day, which was the last time I actually got to see him, I went to the hospital, and he said, do you still have Molly? Which is what I named her. And I said, yes, sir, I do. And he said, okay, can you do me a favor? And I said, yes. And he said, anytime you miss me or you feel alone, I want you to squeeze that stuffed animal really hard. And he's like, and I'll be there and I'll see you. And I was like, okay, Grandpa. Like, I called him Poppy. And I was like, okay. And so, you know, the remainder of the time visiting him in the hospital, you know, I kept pondering on that, like, you know, I didn't understand. Like, I felt like there was fixing to be a loss. I was fixing to lose something because it was very serious, but I didn't quite understand that. So it had to be around between the ages of 7 to 9. I really think it was around when I was probably around 8. I don't know exactly what I did, but I ended up, you know, angering my father very much so. Got very angry, and he said, you know, well, if this is not the family you want, and if you can't act right, then you can go to another family. And during the process of him, you know, yelling and screaming and all this, I didn't really understand what's going on. You know, I'm looking to my mom. My mom is just a emotional mess, just crying and, you know, please don't do this, please don't do this. And I don't understand what's going on, except for, you know, he tells my mom, pack her a bag. So I remember it was like a white bag with like rainbow colors or something, and it was a drawstring, and she made me that little bag. And
No, it's okay.
And I remember her telling me, you have to be strong. Please know that I'll always love you. Always. And I start crying, and I'm looking at her, and I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on, because I feel like my mom's talking to me as if this is it. Like, I'm not going to see her again. But I don't, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but that's all as I didn't understand it. And I'm like, okay, Mom. I was like, I'll always love you too. And she's like, okay. And she stands at the door and watches me, you know, walk, you know, to the van. At this moment, you know, I'm looking at my dad, and there's like no emotion at all. Like, there's just blankness. Like, almost like, I mean, it can sound silly, but not human. Like, there was no, you know, there's no connection at all. It was almost like I didn't know who he was at that moment. I rode silent in the car the whole way. We actually had a van at that time. And I remember him pulling up to this, you know, it was like I guess a little strip mall, but he told me that door that he was leaving me at was an orphanage. And he said, if you don't like our family and you can't act right, then you can go be with another family. And he said, get out of the van. So he opens the door, I get out, I stand on the sidewalk, I'm holding Molly, and I have my little backpack, and I watch my dad drive away. And it has to be very, very late at night, because there are no cars, there's no people, there's nothing. And so I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, oh, it's okay, he's going to turn around and come back and get me. I don't know how long it was, you know, because as a child, a lot of times, you know, the moments, it feels like it's a lot longer than it actually is. So then I remember just grabbing Molly, laying her on the sidewalk, and laying down. And I remember specifically how I even laid her on the ground is her head. When I laid down, I could see her face. And all I remember is hearing my grandpa's voice. If you ever feel alone or you miss me, hold Molly really tight and I'll be there. So I just grab Molly and I hold her really tight and I just start crying. And I remember all I kept saying is, I wish you were here, Poppy. I wish you were here. Moments after that, you know, my dad pulls back up and says, so are you ready to act right? Are you ready to go home? And I was like, yes. I remember at that moment in my life is when I came to be terrified of my dad. Because at that moment I realized he didn't have the depth of love for me that I thought he did, that he could abandon me on a drop of a hat.
Wow.
And that's where I know for sure that's where my abandonment issues started. That, you know, and of course, because the church we were, you know, raised in was very much hail and brimstone, I felt like God could abandon me too. So at this moment, you know, I feel like I'm nothing. I can just be thrown away and it would affect no one. That it would cause no ripple in time, that it would affect nobody, that if I just wasn't there, I just wouldn't be there. After going home, you know, of course my mom was very excited to see me and, you know, hugged me and she was just like, and I remember her telling me, don't make dad mad. Just don't make dad mad. And I was like, okay, Mom, I won't make Dad mad. That's all I remember. So I remember from that point in my life, literally just not saying anything. Whether he screamed at me, hit me, yelled at me, whatever it was, there was no response, because all I had in the back of my mind is, I am not, that's not the word throwawayable. That's not even a word, but disposable. Yeah. I am disposable at a drop of a hat. So, you know, at that moment, you know, I realized, okay, well, I felt like I was worth nothing. Like, I'm nothing, because if I can be thrown away like that from my dad, then, you know, it's okay. So I just decided to just start following with whatever he said, you know, whatever he do. I remember one specific time, again, I don't know what I did wrong. All I know is that my dad decided to spank me, but he wouldn't stop spanking me. And I started crying, and he was like, your will is not broken. So I remember making myself, I'm sorry. I started crying, and he's like, you're being too emotional. You're not learning. So then I made myself stop crying and just dealt with it. But then if you didn't cry, your will wasn't broken. So at that moment, I felt like there was no, like, what am I to do then? Can you just tell me what to say? Can you just tell me how I'm supposed to act so that I can do what makes you happy? And it was at that moment in my life that I realized, you know, I feel like anything my parents felt was my fault. I was responsible for every adult's emotional and action, and it was my fault. So I remember that day when that happened. I remember my mom running into the room and saying, you know, please stop. Don't do this. Please stop. Someone's going to call somebody. Because apparently my mom said I was screaming. After that, you know, my dad got mad and he left the house. Probably about an hour later, you know, this lady shows up on our doorstep, knocking on the door with a briefcase. I remember my older brother grabbing my face and looking at me, and he says, don't say a word. Let me talk. Don't say anything. He said, yes or no, answers only. Do not explain. Do not anything. He said, don't cry. Don't act scared. Don't do anything. And I'm like, okay. So the lady comes in, talks to my mom, whatnot, then takes me and my brother to another room. And, of course, now I understand that it was CPS. Proceeds to ask me to undress. Well, of course, through, you know, because of things I've been through in my past and molestation, I'm just like, you know, I don't want to willingly do this. So, of course, I don't. So she starts taking my clothes off.
What?
Mm-hmm. She starts taking my clothes off.
What?
Yeah. She starts taking my clothes off and starts examining my body. And I know to this day that it was just God, because I should have been bruised. I should have had marks. I had nothing on my body at all. There's zero proof of anything happening. And all I remember her asking me is, does your dad hit you? And I said, no. Does he spank you? No. Do you feel safe? Yes. And every time she would ask me a question, I would do like a side eye and look at my older brother. And my older brother would like signal to me what I'm supposed to say, because I was so terrified. I was like, I didn't, you know, it wasn't like I was enjoying, you know, the treatment that I was going through, but I didn't want to be taken away from my parents either. So thankfully, you know, they examined my older brother as well, and, you know, they ended up leaving the house. And I just remember my mom falling on the floor and just bawling and bawling. And of course, you know, that's what I'm saying. It has to be between the ages of, you know, 7 to 9 that this happened. And, you know, mine, you know, for the listeners, you know, I want them to know too, the way that we were raised in this church, you might have been 12 years old, but mentally you're 7 or 8.
Oh, that's good.
There was no outside. You could not communicate, be with anyone outside the church. If
You're very much treated like you're a 7-year-old.
Yeah. And so mentally, to where, you know, children nowadays would be a 7-year-old as a 7-year-old, that's not the case with the way that we grew up. My next, I know the molestation happened between the ages of 5 and 11. It was a continuous thing. I get, you know,
From a
images and pictures. No, the one time was a woman when I was 5. The rest of the time, it was men. There was several older men in the church that were, to me, extremely inappropriate. Like, you know, one specifically, you know, always complimented me on my eyes, and my skin color. And, you know, when everybody else would be gone or something, he would put his hand on my inner thigh and he would tell me, "You're such a beautiful little girl." a man is going to be so lucky to have you one day. And all I remember is just being terrified, but then also, going back to the way we were raised, well, at least how I was raised, is the only opinion that matter is that when my man that came into my life that I was called to marry, my right man, I had to make sure I had my P's and Q's. I crossed my T's and dotted my I's. You better know how to be a homemaker. You stay beautiful. You don't cut your hair. That was very much ingrained into me. So whenever a man would come up and say something that would make me feel uncomfortable, I would rationalize it. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, this is actually a compliment because this is what, this is what I'm brought up to be. So he's giving me a compliment. Don't be nervous. It's okay. This is normal. So throughout my childhood, I normalized a lot of things that men would say to me as this is normal because this is my only purpose in life is for a man to approve of me.
Wow.
At the age of 11 is when I became a woman. The monthlies were extremely difficult. I would have to end up skipping school. I couldn't go to school. Just in severe pain, throwing up. There would be like periods 3 to 5 days I couldn't even eat because I was in so much pain. So my mom ended up taking me to the doctor. And, of course, it wasn't that time at that moment, but she ended up doing a exam on me. And she proceeded to ask me, can I ask you a question? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, do you have a boyfriend? And I was like, no, ma'am. I was like, I'm not into boys. No, ma'am, not at all. And she's like, okay. She's like, are you sexually active? Well, at that age, nowadays an 11-year-old, they already know what that is. At my age, I hadn't even been told about the birds and the bees yet. So I didn't even know what that was. So I just kind of look at her and I'm like, sex? I didn't understand what she was asking me. So she said, okay, hold on. Go ahead and put your clothes back on. I'm going to go talk to your mom. So she goes out of the room, talks to my mom. My mom comes back in the room, and my mom has just been bawling. I can tell she has just, and I'm like, Mom, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. Not until I was much older in life did my mom tell me what the doctor told her was there is signs that intercourse has happened, and she is no longer a virgin. So there was a period of time where my innocence was taken from me, and I have no recollection of it, and I don't recall it.
Wow.
God.
So, yeah. So then going on from there, at this point, I have, grown up to see the world as something absolutely terrifying. Not only because of the way the church is, anybody outside of the church is going to hell, basically. They're all evil. There's nothing but evilness out there. You stay away from that. So not only did I grow up to fear the outside world, I lived in daily fear in my own home life, Had a very warped image of what God is, of what my Heavenly Father is. Growing up believing that I was just hated. Not only was I something that was, could just be thrown away at a drop of a hat with no emotion, not caring. But then, also being, I to the point of where I felt like, my every breathing and waking moment, I was hated. And I didn't know why. I did not understand, why it was that way. Okay, so I would say that my next recollection of most of the recollections that I have are very traumatic experiences in my childhood. I still have, bits and pieces and pictures, but there are monumental moments. I do know at the age of 13, I told my mom, I want a promise ring. And she said, okay. She said, why? And I said, well, because in the Bible it says, a virtuous woman is far above rubies, and blessed is a man who can find that. And I said, I want that. And I want to wear that until the day that I meet my right man. And then that is a gift that I give to him. So we ended up having a birthday party. I don't know if y'all remember it. It was the Messy Olympics. When we did the chocolate, where we had the slip and slide with the chocolate.
Holy cow, I forgot about that till just now.
And the eggs, and then the baby food, you had to blindfold. So I had a great birthday with that. My parents ended up giving me a promise ring, and, I wore that. Not long after that, I was approached by a man in the church. And he told me, I think you're my right woman.
What? Now, this is an adult, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. Age specifically, I know he was at least in his 30s, if not a little bit older than that.
What the freaking hell? Okay.
So, at this moment.
And you were how old?
13.
Yeah. 13.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so, at this moment, I'm struggling because I'm just like, I'm not, because of everything I've been through in my life, I'm not interested in guys at all. Like, nothing there at all. No desire for nothing. But then, of course, I rationalize it mentally. Okay, well, if this is the one that has chosen me, then I need to make sure, I look pretty, I, can cook. So that's exactly what started happening. Every Sunday I would dress up because he would tell me, oh, well, you look beautiful today. He started hanging out with our family. I would cook him dinners and bring him dinner.
Question. Did your parents know that he said that to you?
I don't know. I don't think I ever told them that.
Talk about grooming. Like
I did always, I did always wonder, because he would hug me, he would grab my hand, at times, things like that. But because there was no reaction from any adult, that was not something that should go on.
Did that happen in front of other adults?
I know he would tell me I'm pretty in front of other adults. But
really?
the giving me a hug or touching my hand, I do not recall. So I cannot give an answer on that. And I think part of it is because, every time I was touched, it was not in a good way, but it was the world just stopped. And I'm in that moment, and just fear and anxiety and everything would just kick in of me trying to rationalize in my mind, hey, this is what you were raised for, so it's okay.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell myself.
That was something that was reiterated by every female and male in that area. You were literally raised for a purpose, and it was to serve other people.
Yeah. I do specifically remember one youth night that we had. The person giving, I guess you'd say sermon or whatever, gave the example of two sheep that are coming to a crossing on a cliff. And one sheep, since both of them couldn't cross, one sheep would lay down and the other one would walk on top of it so it could cross. And the one that laid down would then cross after that. And the person specifically said, this is what women are supposed to be for their men.
what?
That is biblically the opposite of what it is supposed to be.
So in my mind, I'm like, okay.
Jeez almighty.
Oh my God, I'm so angry right now.
So in my mind, it's a thing of, okay, you stay submissive, you don't say no, you don't fight, you don't nothing, because you're supposed to appease them. That person started hanging around with the family more, started going on family vacations with us, would buy me very expensive gifts, tell me, he loves me all the time, and, how much he can't wait for me to grow up because he knows I'm his, right woman.
What? Do your parents know this today?
I don't know if they believe you.
I have tried in the past to talk to my dad about it. Really have not really gotten anywhere, and well, that didn't happen, or that's not how it happened. My mom is very much aware of things.
Stephen, you hearing all this, I see your face as your wife. I'm looking at you. You're pretty pissed right now.
I mean, it's not so much that I'm angry. This pretty much all of this is stuff that I've already known about from conversations that Savannah and I and our older brother have had. It's more, it's been talked about, but it's never really been talked about, especially not in a setting like this, and it's very uncomfortable.
I think because the four of us have been doing this podcast, and let's face it, this podcast has been years in the making.
Yeah.
We've been at this, beating this dead horse, and working with this issue for so long. But let me tell you guys, it really breaks my heart.
Yeah. I know that man is still around, and he's freaking Facebook friends. No, I'm gonna say he's fucking Facebook friends with people, and I like, holy shit.
I just feel the need to say it. You guys weren't.
You didn't deserve
You
that.
didn't deserve that.
No, you didn't.
And
I don't think. Sorry, go ahead.
We were treated that way, but that was our normal, and it's heartbreaking to hear that you guys endured that.
It's hard that this is the part that gets me, and all of us kids were enduring something. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, mental abuse, and none of us talked about it to each other because we all thought that we deserved it. We all thought we deserved it.
And you both were the coolest kids. Savannah, you always made me laugh. You were so bubbly. I loved being around you because whenever I felt down, you know, you always had you wanted to giggle about something. And I wanted to giggle too because people that giggled made me forget.
Well, I have to be honest. Whenever we would have our family get-togethers for the holidays, y'all were my escape.
Yeah.
Y'all were my
Y'all
moment.
were our escape too.
Yeah.
Y'all were my moment of I cannot think about anything that I'm going through. And, you know, there were so many times, you know, at the end of it when we had to go home, there were so many times I wanted to ask y'all, can I stay?
You wouldn't have wanted to.
But no, think about it. Like,
We would have been better
both-
finding a train,
both
hopping the train.
both,
Let's all pack a bag.
if I'm looking back, both sets of parents behaved to their utmost, to the best of their behavior when we had our families together
Well,
for Christmas and
honestly,
Thanksgiving.
that was with a lot of the families in the
Well,
church.
yeah.
Whenever we would go to church, it was a persona, and that's something
Yeah.
I actually struggle with that today as an adult. Of that, it's okay to be real. If
Yeah.
I'm not okay, it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to put on this face or, you know, be tough or pretend like life is just peachy when it's not. But, you know, I was raised to where when we go to church or we're around other people, you don't talk about this, we don't look at this, you better smile, be on your best behavior. So it became this where you literally become somebody completely different.
Y'all were some of the like most behaved children.
Y'all really were.
Y'all really were. Y'all did not go anywhere without saying yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no
Opening
sir.
doors for
Still to this day
people.
y'all are like that. But yeah, no, opening doors, like all of y'all were always like that. Just
You were
never
always so grateful. Every one of you would overthank
Yes.
people for stuff.
You
that
would.
it
And
just-
now we know why. Shit.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Stephen, is there anything you want to tell Savannah in hearing this to help her as her brother?
I'm sorry. You know, being your younger brother, I know that when I came along, you know, our older brothers mentioned a lot that, you know, I was the favorite. And there was a lot of stuff that didn't happen to me because y'all took the brunt of it. But I also know that there was stuff that happened because there's things that I remember. But I also know, talking to my late grandparents pre-COVID, when I was actually able to see them before they passed, you know, I had asked them about our childhood. And I remember asking my grandfather, you know, why is it so hard for me to remember things about my childhood, you know, up to a certain point? And he wouldn't give me an answer, but all he said was, well, Stephen, it's probably a good thing you don't remember. There are things I do remember, but there's a lot of things I don't remember. You know, if I could have made a difference, I would have. And I'm really sorry for everything that you've gone through.
But that's also not, I appreciate you saying that, but it's really not your responsibility. And as the second oldest and the oldest girl, I wanted y'all to be protected from what I went through and things that I experienced.
And I get that, you know, but for me, I have a very strong drive as a protector, you know, to keep people in general safe, especially my family. And, I have, especially now in my adult years, even when I was, a teenager, I had a very low tolerance for abuse. It would enrage me when it would happen, to the point of where when I finally actually started getting an education in school, I remember one specific time there was a young lady who was in a wheelchair because she was paralyzed, and she was talking to a friend of mine that was in a class that I had and was crying, and I asked what happened, and there was a guy that started making fun of her because she was in a wheelchair. And I didn't actually fight the guy. It didn't take that, but it made me so mad. I got in this guy's face, and I was ready to fight him, but there was this is going to sound kind of arrogant, but there was something about me when I was younger that when I would get angry, it was like a switch would flip, and people were terrified of me when I would get angry like that. And this dude was just apologetic, kept saying he was sorry, he didn't mean it, he wasn't trying to hurt her feelings, but I was ready to beat this dude to the ground. I was so mad because I'm like, you don't do that, you don't treat people that way. Even to this day, I'm still the same way, whether it's kids or adults, if someone's being treated that way, I'm more of the viewpoint of, okay, I'll step in and you need to pick on someone your own size. Because I don't tolerate that. It's wrong, of any age, of any sex, it doesn't matter. So for me, it's hard to hear you share some of this stuff, even though we talked about it before. And I guess it grieves me to the point more of where I couldn't do anything about it, and I couldn't make those changes, and I'm sorry that that's something that you went through. Unfortunately, I think that because of the stuff that we did go through, me, not as much as you and our older brother, there are things I remember, but I think that caused us to be closer in ways, but I also think possibly in unhealthy ways. You can't say you have a tight-knit family when what's united you is tragedy and trauma. That's not healthy. And I think all of our siblings struggle with that, of we have this desire to be close and spend time together, and we all love each other. Our parents, all of our siblings, this is not about bashing and dredging up the past. This is just sharing something that we feel, or I can pretty confidently say I know other kids went through that were involved in this. I'm not going to call it a church anymore because that's not what it was. This cult, if you will. I know there's other kids that went through similar things. There has to be, and I think that's the point of this, is to, for one, share, our stories. I haven't really got to mine yet, but to be able to share our stories and say, this happened to us. But I think also to say there is healing.
Oh yeah.
There is forgiveness, and there is abundant grace from the Lord. And with this, I think you learn. For myself, one of the big things I learn is how big forgiveness is, because a lot of people think that, forgiveness is about the other person, and it's not. Forgiveness is about you. When you hold unforgiveness and resentment and bitterness, it's, in the words of my mom, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. And that's really what it is, because it'll destroy your life. I've dealt with that in the past, of just being so angry and bitter at people and holding on to grudges. For one, it made me an extremely angry individual when I was younger, to the point of where any emotion that I felt outside of happiness was combated with anger, whether it be physical or emotional pain. Anytime I felt it, I would just get enraged. Very quick to get into it with anyone who looked at me the wrong way. Very quick to, tell someone what I thought, and just no concern with the repercussion or for my own safety. So if you don't choose to forgive, it will take over your life, and it will take out the joy that could be in your life simply because you're not willing to let go of what happened in the past. And when I say let go, I'm not saying, just, oh, everything's fine, you can just forgive and let it. That's not what I'm saying. There's a process to grieving, to understanding what happened, to moving on from what happened. But you do at some point have to choose to forgive. I know that's easier said than done, but if you don't, it will ruin your life. It also makes it very hard to have any kind of fruitful relationship with anyone if you're not willing to move past that.
And it sounds like, Savannah, like you've been doing that. Right?
I
From
have.
what?
Part of it is because I started seeing in myself, like, my son came to me one day and I surprised him with a cookie. And I said, you want a chocolate chip cookie? You can have a chocolate cookie. And he goes, is it because I'm a good boy? Are you happy with me today? And I lost it. I just started crying and I just held him and I said, I'm giving you this cookie because I love you. You don't have to earn this. This is not, and at that moment I realized the trauma that I had as a child is, I don't feel like I was ever given anything out of unconditional love just because I was loved. Yeah. I had to accomplish something. I had to do something. I had to emotionally appease someone to be recognized and to be given something. And I saw that I started doing that with my own children. And that was the day I told myself, excuse me for cussing, but this is fucking enough.
Yeah.
This is enough.
Good
I'm
for
not
you.
about to pass down this generational crap to my children, and my children suffer for something they didn't even do, something that I went through. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And so this is something I've been, dealing with in my own life of getting past and healing. I do IET, which is integrated energy therapy. And basically you work with angels and we go in and we can actually remove negative energy. It also repairs your DNA. So whenever anyone goes through anything traumatic, it actually can attach itself to your DNA. And that is one of the things that I do. And through my classes, I learned that not only when you're healing someone, you're also being healed in return. And we can heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So in my mind, I was just like, you know what? If I can pave the way for my children, that they never, I don't want my children to grow up in a childhood and have to heal from their childhood. I don't want this. Like if my children were to grow up and have to sit here today and do a podcast and talk about how mom did this and mom did that, I would want to die. I'm just being absolutely honest. It would literally destroy me. And that is and that's one of the reasons I'm even doing this podcast today, is because for me, speaking my truth, regardless of who it upsets or doesn't want to talk to me anymore or whatever, I'm telling my story of what I went through. So, a lot of people say, oh, always speak the truth. But the problem is a lot of people think the truth is just this beautiful, flowery, sparkly unicorns and butterflies. It's not. Sometimes the truth is very hard, very harsh, very traumatizing. And as this podcast, it is. It's not always flowers and rainbows. It is, but it is still the truth, regardless of how traumatic or horrible it sounds. It is still the truth. And that is one of the reasons I am doing it. Because, if I can help someone else, on top of the fact that, my daughter is so proud of me. She even told me that this morning. She texted me. She said, Mom, I'm so proud of you that you're doing this. Because I have shared my story with her. And she said, Mom, do you realize my daughter does energy work as well. She's one of the youngest certified energy workers in the world. And she said, because of you stepping up and speaking your truth, she said, I am not going to struggle speaking my truth. Because you've already opened that door.
I love that.
Yes.
And I was like, that's why I'm doing that. And when Silas grows up, if he's to a point where he wants to listen to this podcast, whether he knows or not, me speaking my truth is opening that door for him as well. So I am already paving the way for them, especially for Silas, without him even knowing it or even being aware of that.
Yeah.
And that is the whole reason.
You're a warrior.
Thank you.
Was there anything else that you wanted to share about your story before we get to Stephen?
Yeah, I have a little bit more to share. So basically growing up, with all the man stuff that I dealt with and whatnot, that became my identity. So of course, I will share that, my first boyfriend I was 17, told me he had this beautiful date set out, at the park, and, I want to take you to the park, and then, oh, okay. So, I'm all excited, getting all dressed up pretty, whatnot, go to the park, and there's no picnic, and he's like, oh, well, no, we're going to make this night about us. And I'm like, well, I don't think I'm ready for that. And a lot of people have the misconception of when you are taken advantage of, well, why don't you just fight it? Oh, you could hit them, but from my viewpoint of everything I went through as a child and the sexual abuse I endured, you literally become paralyzed with fear.
Well, you
So
were conditioned to accept
that as well. And, for other, survivors out there that have dealt with being raped, it is absolutely a thing of during the process it's happening, it is literally like you are almost not in your body anymore. Mm-hmm. You're watching it happen, but you're not experiencing it. Because of that happening, I felt I'm tainted, I'm ruined, what is the point? So I actually took my promise ring off and I threw it away. And from that point on, I literally went into the mindset of, fuck it. I don't care anymore. I don't care, So at the age of 18, my parents get a divorce. Everybody starts splitting up. My brothers and sisters are split up. From the age of 12, I've been taking care and raising my brothers and sisters. So they literally became my identity. They became my reason for breathing, for living, for... even when I was 15, I had appendicitis. And when I was 16, I got, diagnosed with lupus. And I was told, 6 months, you're going to make it about 6 months. But after 6 months, you're going to be hospitalized until the end. And even, with me being so sick to the point where I can barely walk and can't eat anymore, I have to just drink, protein drinks just to try to keep, my body up. Of course, being made fun of from I would call not friends. Obviously, now I know that, because I started looking anorexic. And it wasn't by choice. It was because I was sick. But it was also because I still chose every morning to wake up and make sure my brothers and sisters had breakfast. There was a clean house. They had the things that they needed. So at the age of 17, when that happened, and then my parents getting divorced, I lost my horse, which was very much an escape for me. Like at night when I couldn't sleep, I would go get in the pen with him, and I'd cover him and myself with a blanket and sleep with him. So he was very much my escape from reality, and my one moment of I don't have to think of anything. I can just be in that moment. I lost him because of the divorce. So at that moment, I was just like, I stopped thinking about my brothers and sisters, and I thought about myself, and I was like, I want out. I'm done. So I ended up moving in with my mom and her husband at that time. But then as I lived there, comments started being made. Oh, well, you have really nice breasts. I wish your mom's breasts looked like yours. Taking a shower, would open the door. Oh, are you in the shower? And nothing more happened than that. But just because of that, it brought up past issues. And I was like, I need to be on my own. At that time, I met one of my brother's friends. And I just decided, you know what? Fuck it. I want to be on my own. I don't know anything about the world. I'm literally fucking terrified. How am I even going to survive? Without even understanding and knowing that I literally could make it on my own. Didn't know that. So at the age of 18, I got a car, started working 2 jobs, and got myself an efficiency, and just disappeared and left. And I do want to say that I'm sorry because of that. Because I know that's something that, one of my younger brothers, him and I have talked about, and he said, I felt like you abandoned me. You just left. And it was not a thing of where I did not care and I did not love y'all, but I was not in a good mental place. I really feel like I went from just dealing with everyday life to survival mode, and I just shut everything off. I shut my emotions off. I shut it all off, and it was just about making it and surviving is all it became. So I do apologize to you for that I did, just up and leave with no explanation and just disappearing.
Well, I appreciate it, but I mean, there's no reason for you to apologize, and nobody in our family was at a good mental state. So, I don't hold that against you at all, and I totally understand.
This isn't the time necessarily to bring this up, but part of me like thinks back, what kind of unhappiness were our parents dealing with? They don't really, it doesn't really, it doesn't justify any of this.
Yeah.
But I would never say half of the things that were said to me as a child, to another child, to a stranger's child, would never enter my consciousness to say to anybody.
And, you know,
Have you ever had that thought happen?
I have, and then I came to the realization that as I was growing up, so were my parents. Ugh. And that's actually how I learned to forgive, is that they were where they were at that moment in time. And, you know, my mom and dad had me and my brother very young. You know, they were still in their teens. So it was... I can't imagine. You know, I had my daughter at 21, and, you know, I thought, oh, I know everything until I got pregnant. And I was like, and then, yes, the fear kicked in of what kind of parent am I going to be? I don't even know how to be a good parent.
But you tried.
Mm-hmm.
But you tried. And there's this, like, with that, Stephen calls it a cult. I'm going to call it a cult, too. With that cult, there were so many people that treated children the same way. That's just infuriating.
Yeah. It was a very much, you can be seen but not heard unless you're spoken to.
Yeah, and but everybody was treated that way. It wasn't just us, sisters. You guys got it too. Mm-hmm. And there were other people that I know of that had it as well. Now, yes, there were some genuinely good parents in that group, but the ones that were deeply unhappy, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Here's what's mind-blowing to me. That you would live your life that unhappy for that long. You know what I mean? Like, if you're that unhappy, why continue that existence? If you don't like kids, why have kids? That kind of a thing. Anyway.
Is there anything else that you want to share, Savannah?
No, just basically because of the things that I went through in my life, that's what chose, you know, my first two relationships. My relationship with my daughter, and then my daughter's father, and then going on to the relationship with my son's father. And then at that moment, that's when I decided I have to change my thought process.
Yeah. Because
I'm going to continue to attract this kind of toxic man into my life. And I'm going to continue to believe that this kind of treatment is okay because this is what I'm used to. Mm-hmm. And, you know, thank God I have a boyfriend now, and he's absolutely completely opposite. I mean, to the point where there's times it scares me and I'm like, okay, what's your game here? You know? and there is no, you know, like this morning, you know, I was like, babe, I'm so sorry. I know I have to tell you something, but he's like, what do you have to tell me? I was like, I need to turn the light on. He goes, that's it? And I'm like, yeah, but you're trying to sleep. He goes, oh, turn the light on, babe. And I'm all, you know. But it's like, I'm so used to having to walk on eggshells of, oh, if I turn this light on, oh, I don't want to piss him off. Mm-hmm. And then I have something so important today, I don't. And not that he gives me that vibe that but I'm so programmed to believe that my every move is going to anger someone. That and he's really helping me heal with that it is not, this is not, you know, and I refer to them, my exes, as boys. Those are not men, those are boys. And so now I'm having to adjust my life to actually having a man and knowing what that is actually like. So, but yeah, that's awesome.
Well, Stephen, let's hear yours.
Okay. So my earliest memory that I have was with Poppy as well. I think I was probably 4 years old. Whenever we would go to see him and my grandmother in Austin, he had this leather recliner that him and I would always sit in, and we would watch Westerns together, and I'd always fall asleep. We would fall asleep in that chair together watching Western movies. I think that's part of the reason why I still love Westerns is because of that. So that's my earliest memory. And then everything else, it kind of bit in pictures and images that I remember. Most of the memories that I have of, early age aren't good memories. There's memories of molestation that happened. That's pretty much all I'm going to say about that. But I have those memories. I do remember at a very young age, because of a neighborhood that we lived in, getting into fights at a very young age with the neighborhood kids because we were the only white family that lived on that street. I can't tell you how old I was, but I was pretty young, and I remember 2 specific incidences where just for no reason, just the neighborhood kids picked a fight with me and beat me up. And then I remember one time where one kid punched me, and my older brother was there, and I started crying, and he told me, get up and take care of yourself, be a man. And he was simply trying to make me strong. He was trying to help me understand this is the life that we live in, and you have to stand up for yourself. And when he said that, I just remember this rage taking over. I jumped up and I ran after the guy and I tackled him, and I just started screaming and just pounding on him. And then I remember my older brother and someone else pulling me off of him. And then there was another time where a kid walked up to me and said, "Hey, we're going to fight." And I was like, "Oh, you mean wrestle?" And he said, "No, we're going to fight." And he punched me in the face. And I just remember grabbing him and tackling him to the ground. And I remember being on the ground for, didn't seem like very long, rolling around, and then it just ended. I do remember some of the punishments that we had when we were kids, for certain things. It was like, if you said the word stupid or shut up, or if you said the word but, one of the things was, aside from a spanking, was you get to chew on some soap because, you wash your mouth out because you said the wrong thing. I remember stuff like that. I do remember having to stand in the corner, and just so that everyone is aware, I want, if you have kids and you're listening to this, understand punishment is not wrong. Disciplining your kids is not wrong. It is a necessity to help them grow and understand that there are consequences to your actions. What causes it to be wrong is the form and the method of which you do it and how you do it. If you are doing it out of anger and frustration, that is when it becomes abuse. So I want to make that very clear. I don't think there's anything wrong with spanking a child. I think there's something wrong with it when you are excessive and you do it out of anger. That is when it's wrong, because you're doing it for the wrong reason. Discipline is necessary for kids so that way they understand that throughout their life there are always going to be consequences for their actions. Lack of discipline shows them that they can do whatever they want. So I want to make sure I clarify that. I do not think discipline and punishing a child is wrong. It's the way you do it and the method of how you do it. Just to clarify that. But, that's stuff that I remember from the earlier ages that I have memory of. And then from there, it's pretty much, I think around 7 or 8 is when I start getting consistent memories. Maybe 6, but I think it's probably 7 or 8. Of fishing trips with my dad and my older brother, going to parks, and from that point on, it was more good memories. There was a few things I remember that happened, but it was a lot better at that point. I didn't receive the brunt end like my older brother and my sister did. But I can't tell you what happened in the years I don't remember, because I don't have any recollection of some of those years. I do remember spending a lot of time with you guys, especially when we moved closer to where y'all lived. We spent a lot of time together on the holidays and all of that stuff. We were homeschooled after going to the Colts private school, which I think I did first and second grade there. But when we started getting homeschooled, there was very much so a lack of education. And again, just to clarify, homeschooling is not bad. There is nothing wrong with homeschooling your kids. There are many people that I know that were homeschooled that went to live very successful lives. But if you don't have the ability to properly educate your kids, you should not be homeschooling your kids. The other thing, too, is if you're trying to protect your children by homeschooling them, you are hindering them versus helping them. Sheltering them from the reality of this world, even if you're trying to protect them, is going to hinder them. It's going to be a culture shock when they finally graduate and try to go get a job and they realize how ruthless humanity is, because they're going to have a mindset of what reality actually is, and that's not realistic at all. Which is exactly what happened with me. Is being homeschooled, very poorly educated, didn't have the proper teachings. My parents really tried hard. They really, really did, and I know they had all the best intentions. And again, this isn't about being angry or hashing anything out. It's the reality of the situation we were in, and I hope that sharing this story helps bring, healing to other people as well. But yeah, being very poorly educated, not having the proper schooling. Fast forward years down the road, my parents getting divorced. And at that point, with most of my siblings, it just felt like our world was falling apart. I do remember Savannah telling me about what was going on. And that was the very first time that I can remember where I was just full of rage to the point of where it almost gave you like extra human strength kind of thing. Just kind of sounds silly, but I'm sure people have experienced that. Was when I found out my parents were getting divorced and we had to choose who we were going to live with. That hit me hard because our whole lives we were raised off of, I want to say an askewed version of truth, or a partial truth, because I'm a firm believer in the Lord. I have a walk with the Lord, and I am very firm in my faith in Jesus Christ. But at the time, our reality was, you don't get divorced, you don't have sex outside of marriage, you don't do this, you don't do that. And then all of these things that we had learned when my parents got divorced, it felt like our world was falling apart because I was seeing our parents do exactly what we were told to never do. And I just remember feeling like my world was shattering. I went from being homeschooled to being thrown straight into high school freshman year. I was 15 when I went to high school and didn't realize it until years down the road, but I went into a freshman year of high school with a 6th grade education. So sitting in basic algebra class and not knowing what the teacher's talking about, and learning all these things for the very first time, trying to wrap my head around what is going on because I had no idea. I'd never even heard of algebra. I was doing, I guess still arithmetic at the time. It was because my education was so far behind. So I go into high school, and that's when reality hits of how cruel people are. There was a small group of friends that I had that I knew from another church, but, I couldn't relate to them at all. Showing up to school with a lunch sack, or a sack lunch rather, and kids looking at you like weird because you're not eating the cafeteria lunch. And then when they ask you, you can't lie. So you just say, oh, I don't have money. Or why don't you have money? I don't have money. You don't have an allowance? I'm like, no, I don't have an allowance. We don't do that. We don't get paid for doing chores. We just do chores. But that realization after my freshman year, which shockingly, I did not fail. My freshman year, I actually really applied myself, really learned a lot, and I passed my freshman year with all B's and C's, even though I was learning everything for the first time. Got into NJROTC, which helped a lot, created some discipline. But then that summer, the anger and the rage that I still had but hadn't really been letting out just kind of took over. I started getting into things I shouldn't have been getting into, getting into crowds I shouldn't have been getting in with. Part of the reason for that was because the crowds I started getting in with accepted me because they had come from similar backgrounds of broken families, having a hard life, poverty, and things like that. And so I started affiliating with people that I shouldn't have, started taking on mannerisms, drug abuse, drinking. I was never actually part of a gang. I was never jumped into a gang or anything like that, but because the people that I was affiliated with, I was listed as gang affiliated at both of the high schools that I went to because of how I behaved and the people that I would associate with. It got to the point where I don't even know if you remember or not, Aaron, but your dad wouldn't even let you and your other sister hang out with me because he was saying, yeah, we're going to get gang raped.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. No, apparently you were in a gang, and I was just like, no, he's not.
No,
Stephen's not in a gang.
I was friends with people who were affiliated and were gang members. Actually, gang members, which I know sounds silly to people who know me. They're probably like, oh, who was in a gang? You'd be surprised what you can find when you look for it. But yeah, I got into, when I was 16, I started doing some drugs and drinking, and then it just kind of spiraled from there, going on. I stopped caring about my education, and just simply, reacted to everything going on around me in a very poor way. And then I think it was when I was 17, I think. I actually got jumped by 7 guys because I was supposed to go fight one of them. And the guy who I was going to fight didn't want to fight me. He was scared of me, so they decided to jump me instead. And I got jumped by 7 guys, and I got beat up really bad. I had like full-size footprints on my back. Aaron, I don't know if you ever saw me when that happened, but
I saw your face.
Yeah.
And I think you showed me your back.
Yeah, so like my face, can't confirm for sure. I'm pretty sure they broke my cheekbone because my face was so swollen. I was playing football at the time. I couldn't even put my football helmet on. I'm pretty sure I had some separated ribs, had full-size footprints on my back.
How old were you?
17, I think.
Oh my God.
16 or 17. But it was a situation I put myself in. But when that happened, I think my dad got a reality check of how far I had gone and the things that I'd gotten involved with. So he ended up having me move in with Savannah and her ex, or asked me if I would. I don't know what conversation Dad had with you with that, but...
Yeah, I know Dad called me and he was like, hey, Savannah, he's like, Steven's really gotten into some messed up stuff. And he's like, and I know it's gang related. And he said, it's not safe for him here anymore. Because I remember what happened with your face because we couldn't find you. Mom called me in the middle of the night. We can't find Steven. We don't know where he is. And, at that time with my relationship, a lot of times, my boyfriend was just MIA, would take my phone, would take my car. Thank God that night he didn't take my phone, but he took my car. So I had no way to get a hold of him, to get a vehicle, to even try to go see if I could go find my brother. But then, of course, I was like, absolutely, so yeah. And then you moved in.
Yeah, so I moved in. We lived in South Austin. I changed high schools. Still affiliated with the same kind of crowd, but not at the same level that I was because, for one, what had happened when I got jumped was there was a rival gang, and that's one of the guys I was supposed to fight. But when they jumped me, there were 5 of that rival gang, and then there were 2 of the gang that I was affiliated with helping them, which, you know, the terminology is being a flip-flop, which, frankly, in reality, in most places, you get shot and killed for, or beat severely for doing that. And there were never any repercussions of any sort for those 2 individuals who flipped on me. So after that happened, I was like, well, this is a joke, because these guys should be dead in the street right now for flipping on their own colors. You know, you don't do that. And that's pretty much when I gave up that. But then when I changed schools, still affiliated with the same individuals, just did not affiliate at the same level that I was. Still drinking, still doing drugs and things like that. Got a job because my options were to move back in with my one of my parents, or start working full time so that I could actually, you know, stay with my sister and her ex. And so I dropped out of school, started working full time. And then I think when I was 18, I got my GED, and then I went to ACC for a little bit, did some college classes. Didn't get a degree, but I did do some college courses. That was actually a big point in my life where I realized, you know, if you put your mind to something, regardless of your history and your past, there's a lot you can accomplish, because I never would have thought myself as a college student, and I was taking college courses. So that was a big point in my life. But then the big changing point in my life, you know, came from my sister's ex. He did help me a lot understand certain things and realize, you know, the consequences of the lifestyle that I was living. But then the 2 of us would also still affiliate in that lifestyle that I was living. So it was kind of I don't know what you would call it.
Do as I say, not as I do. Maybe
Kind of,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in 2007, the company I was working for at the time wanted to go on they were going on a mission trip to Acuna, Mexico, to build a house for a pastor's family that was there in Mexico, and they wanted me to go. I didn't want to go. I didn't want anything to do with it, but I went. And that whole experience just changed my life. I actually, it was September 20th of 2007 is actually when I got saved. You know, I can even still take you to that very spot where I was standing when it happened that night. And at that point, that is where my life started to drastically change. Mainly because the way that we were raised, you know, the strict discipline, the false truths or partial truths of what, you know, who God is, because of the cult that we were in and how we were raised. When I started getting discipled on who God really was, it opened my eyes to the reality of who the God is I actually serve. It took me a long time to get to the point where I started seeing my self-worth, and actually understanding who I am as a person and as a man. But you know, it's a very sad thing looking back now on how we were raised and this cult that we were in, of how many kids just like us have been given false truths, false identities, you know, made feel like they're not good enough because of a misconception of who God is, which is what the reality was. You know, we were, you know, like y'all said, fire and brimstone, God. That's not who God is at all. You know, that is not who God is at all. Yeah. And a lot of people feel like they're trapped because they're not worthy. And that's, you know, if people who know us are listening to this, that's not true at all. You are called worthy. You are worthy of his love. And if you seek that love, I guarantee you will realize how many great things you've been called to in your life. You know, so yeah, that's pretty much up to this point, that's, a lot of the memories that I have, and there's a lot that I haven't talked about, but it's kind of, I guess you say inadmissible at this point. It's not really anything of consequence, but,
How do you guys, as siblings, because you're pretty much the two that's only pursuing healing at this point in time, how do you feel like you are breaking family rules by, how do you deal with that?
I guess for me, because of the way I was raised, it's kind of like what happens at home stays at home. You don't talk about outside of that. Whatever is personal, that stays. But with me, the reason why I'm speaking out, yes, at first it was hard for me, because I actually considered it before you even approached me and asked me about being on this podcast. And one of the only reasons why, honestly, is because of listening to y'all's story and listening to what y'all shared, what y'all went through. And it really inspired me to feel like I have a voice. I owe it to myself to share what I went through. It is not about talking bad about others or trying to put someone down, or I'm not responsible how someone takes what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I am simply just sharing my story of what I went through and how it affected me. I am not attacking anyone. So I had to bring that concept into that whoever either responds or reacts over this, that's not my responsibility. But being raised to where truth is everything, this is truth. It's ugly, but this is truth.
Okay, so Stephen, I have a question. Sorry, Ashley. But this has been burning inside me. Okay, so, we have talked about as growing up as girls, growing up in, the church, the cult, how it was all these messages that were given to us. And were there any messages that boys were given at that church that you think is toxic?
See, that's the thing is I was, there's so much memories I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what we were taught in children's church. A lot of the things that I remember is when I was older, where, we were to be an example of Jesus Christ. We were to be a living example. One of the biggest things that to this day still drives me crazy is turn the other cheek. That was ingrained into my head as a child. People, you have to forgive. You have to turn the other cheek. You have to turn the other cheek. You have to turn the other cheek. To the point of where there was, a young man that was a member of the church that I was friends with who actually physically assaulted me several times. Just blatantly, playing sports, playing basketball, would grab my arm and just wrench it and actually hurt me, would shove me, would kick me. Things like that. And it was just so ingrained of turn the other cheek and forgive, to the point of where you can't defend yourself, which is complete nonsense. In reference to that verse, turn the other cheek, that has nothing to do with someone actually attacking you in a physical form. That has nothing to do with that at all. That verse is entirely directed towards taking up an offense towards someone for what they say or do. That does not mean do not defend yourself. That thing drove me crazy because I know now if I was a child, yeah, that would have been a punch to the face. I'm like, you're not going to treat me like that, That's one thing that took me a long time to get past was, it's like that, it's a partial truth, turn the other cheek, but it doesn't mean you allow someone to beat you up and bully you. That was one of the things that took me a long time to get past was stuff like that. It's just a total false teaching. That verse has nothing to do with if someone punches you in the face, you turn your face and let them punch the other side. It's simply about taking up an offense and holding a grudge for something someone says or does. It doesn't mean do not defend yourself. So that's one thing I remember being ingrained to me of.
No, Ashley, hold on. I remember that same boy also hurt, the head person's son. And that was taken care of.
Oh, of course.
But not to you.
No.
And I think that happened to other boys as well. But it was that head, woman's son, the head person of the matriarch of the church. Her son got hurt. Something happened. Something was dealt with.
Well,
All right, dear sister, can I talk now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I have 2 questions. One's for Stephen, and then one's for both of y'all. So, Stephen, as women in the church, I think we're really taught a lot about their bodies and being almost taught that they should be ashamed of their bodies. And Savannah talked a lot about, you know, what she felt like she had to do. Were there any messages that you were taught about sex or like your body in particular, like how you were supposed to view other women or not view other women? Or
You didn't view other women. Like, you could not, you could not affiliate with the other sex without adults. You couldn't be around any girls without adults being there. You know,
but all the older men, hey,
but
your heyday.
so yeah, it was just it was I don't know, it was just like, I think it also depended on the mood someone was in. They may say, oh, it's okay, whatever, because I can remember multiple times Aaron and I would hang out by ourselves.
Steven, you and I hung out alone all the time.
Yeah, I know. When we got older, it wasn't
Nothing
so much
ever
like
happened.
that. When we
broke rules.
when we were older, it wasn't like that. But when we were younger, though, I remember them, never allowing the kids to be alone, never allowing them to hang out by themselves.
It's like they knew sexual abuse was rampant in the church.
No, I think it's because maybe if we got together and started talking.
Anarchy!
Yeah. Yeah.
here's my question to both of y'all. What do y'all want our listeners to know from your stories? What is something, or it could be a quote that you came up with. It could be something you want to live by, or, what is it that you want the listeners to know?
I would absolutely say fall in love with life itself. Just as much as your human body can feel trauma and fear and tragedy, fall in love with the little things. Feel that tingle in your heart when you see a rainbow or when a butterfly lands on you, or, me, I'm an animal lover, so I see an animal and it's just like, oh my God, it just makes me so happy. Fall in love with those little things, because even though you can go through something so traumatic where you feel like you're in this constant darkness that you cannot crawl out of, it is absolutely possible to crawl out of that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely possible. And for me, it was starting to enjoy not only just being in the moment, but recognizing the little things. 2 people, that went through stuff, in the church. If you have kids, enjoy those moments with your children. I know for me, with my boyfriend's children and my children, I do art projects with his daughter and my daughter, and just watching the smile in their face of, so what, they get paint everywhere. So what, they're, wearing trash bags. Watching those moments of delight in their face, fall in love with that. And in so many ways, I find myself going back to my childhood and healing myself and my little girl by seeing my kids enjoy that, by seeing them laugh about those little things. There's nothing wrong with going back to that, as a child, and enjoying those things. Mm-hmm. So that would be my biggest thing, is fall in love with life. Absolutely. Yeah. Fall in love with life, because there is so much more to offer. And to me, that is the starting point of healing, is to pull yourself out of that darkness. Even if you have those thoughts that pop up, or those moments of you see something and it triggers something from your past, remind yourself, I'm not my past. Mm-hmm. I'm not that little girl I was before. Mm-hmm. It's different.
Stephen, what about you?
I would say to anyone who's listening, your future is not written in stone. And like Savannah said, your past does not dictate your future. Your circumstances do not dictate who you are. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out and say, I'm hurting and I need help. Don't be so arrogant that you miss the opportunity where you actually are able to reach out and talk to someone who can actually give you a hand and actually help you understand and begin healing from past traumas or hurts, pains, false teachings, skewed realities from, what is actually there. The other thing I would say too, since we were talking about kids and everything, is, enjoy your kids. Enjoy life, like Savannah said. one of the biggest things I've taken away from Brooke and I being married is, there's a grasp on reality of what love is, that when you get married, when you have kids, and you are doing things the right way, you are pursuing the Word of God and wanting to live a godly life and wanting to honor your wife, elevate her above yourself, there's something that happens, because for myself, I fall more and more in love with my wife every day. It's an amazing thing. And one of the things that, God has shown me is the amount of love that I have for my wife, is nothing compared to the love that he feels for me. So it's a huge grace for me, because I can look at my wife and I know that I would do anything for her. I would die for her. And I would always take care of her to the best of my ability. And I remember that is so small compared to the love that my Heavenly Father has for me, the love that our Heavenly Father has for you. So I want you to remember, as you're enjoying life and enjoying your wife, enjoying your children, when you look at them and that joy that you feel, that love that you feel, is minuscule compared to the love that your Heavenly Father has for you. When your wife is hurting, when your children are hurting, and you're looking at them and you're seeing that pain and you feel that pain, and you see that grief and that hurt in them, and you just want to make it better, remember, that is what your Heavenly Father does for you. So through all the trauma that we've been through in our childhood, I remember it makes it so much easier, because I look back now on those things that I've gone through, and I just see my Heavenly Father weeping for me, and just wanting me to turn to Him, and just wanting me to know that He is my Heavenly Father. He's my Abba. And there is nothing that could ever happen to me or through me that would change the way He looks at me. He still sees me as a worthy son. He still sees me as His beloved child, His child who is empowered to prosper. So I want you to remember, no matter what you've been through, there is always a Heavenly Father there who wants you, who accepts you, who says you're worthy, and who weeps with you when you weep and feels your pain. And I want you to remember those pains and those traumas that you've had, and try to see where God was, what He was thinking at that time. Where was Jesus when that was going on? Because I guarantee you, you will see Him weeping with you. And you will see those tears that He sheds are for you, because He knows your pain and He wants to remove it, and He has removed it. You just have to choose it.
Well, Stephen, if you want to start giving sermons, that's a good one. Woo.
I did have one question for both of you. And I don't really even know how to phrase it. An outsider looking in and being married to Stephen, I definitely hear from both your parents a lot, forgive, the message of forgiveness, and it's almost like things aren't dealt with and acknowledged. What is healing for you guys like when your own parents aren't really willing to acknowledge that certain things happened? Is there a part of healing that, because for us girls, we couldn't deal with our dad, but we could stand up to Cindy, and we weren't having her excuses, and we ended the relationship. Now you guys have a much different relationship with your parents, but how do you begin to heal when someone doesn't even acknowledge that there was a wound to begin with?
I really like your question. I thought about asking that because your folks are alive and the relationship is different. So I'll let you answer.
So for me, I love both of my parents. I love both my parents a lot. And, they've done a lot for me since I was older, helped me with a lot of things. I don't need to hear them say it for me personally. The reality of what happened is what happened. If you don't remember, that's fine. You don't have to remember. My healing is not dictated upon who wants to admit or say what they think did or didn't happen. If you don't want to answer questions when I ask, that's fine. My healing is not based upon someone else's answer. My healing is strictly between me and God. I don't need the gratification of hearing someone say, I'm sorry, for me to forgive, and for me to move on, because my life's going to continue, and I want my life to continue with as much joy as possible. And that means letting go of something that, I guess, closure maybe you won't ever actually get, but it's not worth holding on to for me.
Savannah?
Definitely for me, I would have to agree with Stephen on a lot of that. I don't need it to be recognized in order for me to be healed.
Okay.
Because I feel like, it's kind of like sometimes you have to accept an apology that you're never going to receive. And that's realization I came to is, one, I do believe my parents did the best they could at that time. I really do. They did as much as they were capable of.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to hold on to this reality or this thinking of, well, they could have been this, they could have been that. I accept them exactly who they are and where they are. And for me to be able to accept that is for me to move on with my own healing.
Love that.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen and Savannah. I know this was hard for both of you. This was very eye-opening for all of us, and I hope it's eye-opening for, the people who are listening, and I hope it opens doors for people to start talking and to start recognizing their own and acknowledging their own hurt and their own pain.
Thank y'all for being so brave.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so
for
much.
having us.
Thank you for having us.
We love you guys.
We
Love you too.
Thank you, listeners, and we really appreciate y'all listening to this long episode, but we feel like it was really needed. Y'all have a good one.